So I guess I'd kind of have to admit that I'm a lucky guy. Even though I'm about 50% down in service customers and probably 50% down in business, I've somehow managed to keep 4 businesses afloat during this tough economic times. Of those remaining service customers, some of them are still my original customers. I've actually still got 4 of those original customers, and we're going to go service their tank this morning. This particular customer has a 50-gallon tank. It's driven by an under-gravel filter and a power filter hanging on the back, and sure enough, it is salt water. Now, the point of the story this morning is I've usually said try not to do small saltwater tanks. I understand there's an economic issue at your end, but the reality is that those small saltwater tanks are not very stable, and eventually they're going to crash. So if you just increase the volume, which in turn increases the stability, you'll be a lot more successful. So this one particular customer, when they got married, they bought each other a saltwater aquarium. I remember when I picked up the service back in '94, they were living in a trailer on the father-in-law's land out in the hills above Malibu. They had this tank in their trailer, and I remember their youngest or first son was a baby in the crib right next door, or sitting right next to the aquarium. Well, as of today, that baby is in his first year of college, I think at UCLA or USC, one of the two.
And here's our 16-year-old 50-gallon aquarium. As you can see, it's an acrylic aquarium. Oh, by the way, there's something else that came along from the in-laws. That's an African gray parrot by the name of Jamal. You can hear him in the background imitating everybody.
So the issue surrounding small saltwater aquariums is their lack of stability. You obviously have a salt level you're trying to deal with, and the smaller the tank, the greater the effect of evaporation. Evaporation is when the air is so dry that water physically leaves the tank. In the case of a saltwater tank, the salt stays, the water left. So your salinity just got greater. The issue isn't so much with the evaporation occurring. The issue is the fix. And the fix is typically the addition of some fresh water back to the tank. You're trying to bring that salt level back down. But when the water evaporated, it took a little bit of time for that to occur. The fix, again, is the addition of fresh water to dilute or bring that salinity down. But that occurs as you pour the water into the tank right now. So there's a double whammy there. Secondly, there is some chemistry involved in a saltwater aquarium, and ironically the same things, pH, ammonia, nitrite wise, all occur in fresh as well as saltwater. But in saltwater, the range of tolerance is so much more narrow that the effects can be much greater. So I grew up knowing that you didn't want to try a saltwater aquarium less than 50 gallons. This happens to be a 50-gallon tank. It's been running for years, and it's very successful because it's got regular aquarium attention, and it's of a size that lends itself some stability. So we'll go ahead and start by taking the decorations and the canopy off the top of the tank.
This 50-gallon aquarium is part of an attractive custom-made oak entertainment center. The canopy covering the tank is part of that same cabinet system.
So as you can see, it's an acrylic aquarium with a light hood on top. There's a single fluorescent fixture in there. There's a filter slot to accommodate a power filter, heater holes to accommodate power cords and air lines, and then there's a power filter on there. This happens to be a, I think a bio wheel, a Penguin bio wheel, and the wheel, if it's turning, isn't turning much, but again, the tank needs service today. So in addition to the power filter, this tank has an undergravel filter, which is a grid that sits at the bottom of the tank underneath the gravel, hence the name undergravel filter. And it's got uplift tubes in the back corner here. It's got an uplift tube being driven with air bubbles, and back here it's got a power head which sucks the water up through the uplift tube and discharges it out. Also happens to have a patch of eggs on top of that power head, and has for the last 4 months that I've been here, so those are some pretty active percula clowns. We'll have to take care to keep that power head submersed, not to disturb the eggs. But back to the undergravel filter, again, it's a grid that sits underneath the gravel, and it basically sucks water through the gravel. And the grid itself is really only the mechanism, not an actual filter. It's the gravel that becomes the filter, the biological filter, as well as the mechanical filter. It traps a lot of debris in it, and hence the reason we need to get in there and vacuum that gravel. And then we're also going to address the inlet for the power filter and change the filter cartridge. So one of the first things we want to do, aside from exposing the top of the tank, is lay down some towels so we don't make a mess in the area. Had this customer for about 14, 15 years now. Would like to continue on for another 14 or 15.
For those of you who don't know, aside from the wet-dry trickle filter, the undergravel filter, developed in the 1950s, gave the aquarium hobby one of its most significant advancements in aquarium filtration. That being biological filtration, and they didn't know it at the time.
And now with the towels down, this tank too has 2 sets of decorative corals inside of it. We'll place these over here, off to the side. They have been bleached in advance. Then we'll go ahead and pull the dirty corals out of the tank.
There are those who may refer to my methods as being old school, and to a certain degree that may be so, but it's that old school teaching that has been the foundation of my aquarium understanding and practice for the last 25 years. It's also proven itself time after time with this tank, this system, and for 16 years, this customer who has enjoyed the results of that understanding. And while colorful coral reef tanks are the current trend, again, with this older filtration technology, this tank has been successful for 16 years.
So one of the first things we want to do is check our salt level in the tank. .023. That's certainly right in the middle of the safe range. Knowing that this tank is only serviced once a month though, I'm going to add some more fresh water back to it to bring that salt level back down to 1.020. Knowing that as evaporation occurs, the salt level is going to go higher, I want to start out at the lower point and allow it to rise up during that 1 month period that I'm not here, and that'll still contain it or keep it within a safe or tolerable range.
Next time you're near Long Beach, California, take the time to stop in at Age of Aquariums, 2642 Cherry Avenue, just off the 405 freeway near Signal Hill. Age of Aquariums carries a full line of dry goods, supplements, and exotic equipment. Age of Aquariums also carries a wide assortment of living corals, coral frags, as well as fresh and saltwater fish, ranging from the usual, the unusual, and the bizarre. Age of Aquariums is located at 2642 Cherry Avenue, Long Beach, California, near Signal Hill. Open 7 days a week. Call 562-438-6252 or visit ageofaquariums.biz. Tropical Fish Hobbyist Magazine has been the authoritative source for aquarium keepers since the first legendary issue rolled off the presses in 1952. With informative articles month after month about the fascinating world of freshwater aquariums, saltwater setups, paludariums, ponds, and more, illustrated in crisp detail by the world's top aquatic photographers. TFH covers it all. And now, with subscriptions starting at $13.95 and a mobile digital edition you can take with you wherever you go, TFH is your ultimate resource for all things aquatic.
Hi there, my name's Jim Stime and you know me as the LA Fish Guy. Well, I also wear a couple of other hats. One of them is the jellyfish tank called the Jelly Aquarium, and the third is myfishtank.com. I offer an entire line of acrylic aquariums ranging from rectangular to hexagon, flatback hex, as well as the custom curve front aquariums. There's also an entire line of stands and canopies ranging from MDF to pine to oak with a variety of different finishes available. And the website is even smart enough that you can calculate what the freight and crate charges to your location will be. That's myfishtank.com. So with everything out of the tank decoration-wise, we can now go on the inside and start cleaning the inside of the tank. This is an acrylic tank, so we're going to use a cleaning pad made specifically for acrylic. We're just going to wipe the inside of the tank.
To those who may be new to the LA Fish Guys episodes, an acrylic aquarium is made of softer material than a glass aquarium. And with that said, an acrylic aquarium will scratch much easier than a glass aquarium. The easiest way to scratch an acrylic aquarium is to get a granule of gravel between your cleaning pad and the inside of the acrylic material. With a couple of strokes, you can have Zorro across the face of the tank very quickly. So you really want to pay attention as a new owner of an acrylic aquarium with regards to the cleaning material and the method of how you go about actually cleaning the tank.
One of the unmistakable signs of an undergravel filter is this green band that grows along the bottom edge here. This is not the results of a deep sand bed or something that we're striving for. This is simply due to the fact that the undergravel filter grid is pushed up so tight against the edge that you typically can't get in there to clean it. I'm going to use a kind of like a pipe cleaner or an uplift tube cleaner, the end of it here, and try to poke some of that dirty gravel out of there. And I don't know if you can see it. That's the top of the power head there that drives the undergravel filter. A power head is a submersible water pump. Usually has a tapered inlet strainer that sits in the top of an uplift tube. But at the top of that power head is a patch of clownfish eggs. They've laid eggs there about 4 months in a row now, and I assume between visits they lay eggs as well, so that's probably 8 batches of eggs. Those clowns are very protective, and I don't want to disturb those eggs, so I'm going to take and move the power head off the uplift tube down lower so when I do the water change I don't expose the eggs to air and take away the enjoyment of parenthood from those clownfish.
And taking great care not to push the power head up above the surface of the water and maintaining the top of the power head below the surface of the water will also drop it far down in the bottom depths of the aquarium so that when we go ahead and do the water change and the water level comes down at that time, we don't run into the same problem where we're exposing the clownfish eggs or the top of the power head to the air or surface in the aquarium. We want to try to maintain those eggs.
And I mentioned a moment ago using a bottle brush or the end of it to clean that green stripe that hides the unmistakable feature of an under gravel filter. I'm now going to use the brush end of it to clean the inside of those uplift tubes.
And if you're not familiar with what's called an under gravel filter, it's exactly what I just called it. It's a filter that's under the gravel. But technically, it's not a filter itself at all. It's simply the mechanism that draws the water through the gravel through some uplift tubes.
It's just like a bottle brush, where you push it through and clean all that schmutz out from inside there.
These uplift tubes, whether it be air bubble driven or with a power head, and in this particular tank's case, both, serve as the mechanism that moves the water up the uplift tubes and in turn drawing water from the grid which sits below the gravel. The water is pulled from the grid through the gravel, thus forcing the gravel to become exposed to all the water within the aquarium. This being an area where bacteria will colonize, this becomes a very effective biological filter. Not as effective as a wet-dry trickle filter, but still a very effective version of a filter.
Okay, it's time to vacuum the gravel. The size or the amount of water that we're going to use to change, you have to decide on too with these smaller tanks, because newer salt water, the salinity might be slightly different. Certainly the temperature will be different. So you have to decide how much water you're going to use so that you don't radically disturb the inside of the aquarium. But at the same time, you want to be able to accomplish your chore, and in this case the chore is to vacuum the gravel to get as much debris out of there as possible. But also with one slight note, you don't want to disrupt that under gravel filter a whole lot, because that's the biological filter. So there's a lot of things to balance here in trying to decide what's going to work and what's not going to work. What works for me, certainly in the summertime, is a 10-gallon water change. I try to do the same thing in the wintertime, but if it's really cold and I know my water's cold, I'll decrease it down to 5 gallons. But today, we're going to do a 10-gallon water change. So to accomplish this, have two 5-gallon buckets and our siphon vacuum. This is the vacuum end of it. This is what will suck up the gravel. But because it's a flared end, as opposed to this half-inch tubing, the gravel will only flow up part of the way, and then I'll regulate the hose or the flow by kinking the hose to control the balance in there between where the gravel gets sucked out or where the debris gets sucked out of the gravel.
One of the two downsides to the under gravel filter was its lack of ability to aerate the water. Granted, it will aerate the water with air bubbles or a power head breaking the surface, thus bringing the oxygen levels up to what we'll consider a natural level. But unlike a wet-dry trickle filter, an under gravel filter has no means of really aerating the water other than breaking the surface of the aquarium, and hopefully the current is strong enough to push that aerated water at the surface to the lower depths within inside the tank. The other issue with the under gravel filter was the fact that its design simply pulls all of the debris down into the gravel. Well, at some point, this gravel is going to hang on to all that debris. Biologically, it's not able to break it all down, and that's going to begin to restrict the flow of water through the under gravel filter. So the reason for going in and vacuuming the gravel is, in addition to providing a water change as its result, we're trying to free the gravel up of some of that debris within the system. And as we pull some of that water out, we find that we forgot a step.
You have to remember to unplug the power filter, because as the water level drops due to the vacuuming or the siphoning, the power filter at some point will either lose its prime or begin to suck air.
Ironically, the same thing would have occurred with a wet-dry trickle or refugium-style sump filter sitting below. You have to make sure to unplug the water pump before you start drawing out all the water. At some point, the pump will run out of water to draw. Now, understanding what you're trying to do as far as maintenance is concerned with the under gravel filter, many times in the past, I found myself in a position where I had to pace out not only the amount of water I could use to clean the under gravel filter, but at what point was I actually disturbing the biological aspects of the undergravel filter and thus causing a bigger issue, which usually resulted in an outbreak of ick. What I'm referring to is over-cleaning the biological filter or the gravel bed below and thus causing an ammonia or nitrite spike or a decrease in the bacteria's ability to break that waste down, resulting in ammonia or nitrite spike. In addition to the undergravel filter, one can add a power filter or canister filter. The advantage of the power or canister filter is it will share in the ability to draw up a lot of that loose particulate matter within the system. The advantage of the canister filter is it can perform much finer or coarser versions of mechanical filtration. What I'm referring to is polishing the water. It can also act as a chemical filter or an area-to-place activated carbon.
So we're 5 gallons into our 10-gallon water change. Make it a point to come on back for part 2 as we finish up the balance of this small 50-gallon aquarium that I've been servicing for about 14 years now.